The Chicago studio hummed with its usual pre-show electricity. Stagehands darted across the floor, adjusting camera angles and taping down cables. In his dressing room, Steve Harvey stood before the mirror, adjusting the lapels of his perfectly tailored navy suit. At 62 years old, he had mastered the art of looking effortless. The suit cost more than his first car, but he never forgot the decades he spent sleeping in that car, driving 300 miles between failed comedy gigs, eating gas station sandwiches because that was all he could afford. A knock came at the door. His executive producer, Carla, peeked her head in. "5 minutes, Steve. We've got a Buckingham Palace guard in makeup. British Army. Household Cavalry. Did a year-long tour in Afghanistan. Apparently he's a massive fan." Steve nodded, checking his teeth in the mirror. "Royal Guard, huh? Those bearskin hats? Fellas don't even crack a smile when tourists pinch their cheeks." He chuckled, the familiar warmth rising in his chest. This was the part of the job he still loved. Not the money, not the fame, but the people. Every guest had a story, and every story was a key that unlocked something in somebody else. "Name's Samuel Wilson," Carla continued. "Guardsman Wilson. He's been in the UK 7 years now. Came over from Jamaica when he was 19. Jamaican brother guarding the Queen. That's a story right there." Steve smoothed his mustache. "All right, let's go make some people smile." The green room was quiet when Samuel Wilson sat waiting. He was out of uniform now, dressed in a simple charcoal sweater that did little to hide the breadth of his shoulders. Now his hands rested on his knees, palms down, exactly the way they did when he was standing watch at Horse Guards Parade, tourists snapping photos while he stared straight ahead for 2 hours without moving. Discipline wasn't something you turned off. It lived in your spine. He had rehearsed this moment 100 times in his head. He would walk out, shake Mr. Harvey's hand, answer the questions politely, mention that his late brother enjoyed the comedy. Keep it brief. Keep it professional. Don't let the emotions show. A guardsman does not cry in public. A guardsman does not cry anywhere. But his brother's face kept rising behind his eyes. Michael, at 12 years old, teaching him how to tie his school shoes. Michael, at 17, enlisting in the Jamaican Defense Force, looking so proud in his beret. Michael, at 24, sitting in a forward operating base in Helmand Province, watching Steve Harvey DVDS on a portable player because the morale officer had a connection who sent care packages. Michael writing home that the only time the sand didn't feel like it was choking him was when he was laughing at that bald American man who made jokes about marriage and fatherhood and failing before you succeed. Michael had been dead for 3 years now. IED on a routine patrol. Samuel received the news while standing guard at the palace. And he did not move. He did not flinch. He stared straight ahead while tourists snapped photos of the tall black guardsman with the wet eyes, and he waited until his shift ended to walk to the barracks and scream into his pillow. The stage manager appeared in the doorway. "Guardsman Wilson, we're ready for you." Samuel stood, and he straightened his sweater. He walked toward the sound of applause. The stage lights hit Steve Harvey like a warm embrace. He worked the audience easily, the rhythm as natural as breathing. "Now, I want y'all to meet somebody special. This brother guards the royal palaces in London. Stands out there in a big, furry hat. Doesn't move a muscle while tourists try to make him laugh. I tried that once when I visited. Stood there making fish faces for 10 minutes. Nothing. Didn't even blink. I said, 'Man, are you even breathing?' The audience laughed. Steve grinned. 'Please welcome Guardsman Samuel Wilson of the King's Guard.' Samuel walked out, and the first thing Steve noticed was his posture. Not stiff, rooted, like a man who had learned to become unmovable. They shook hands, and Steve guided him to the chair. "First thing I gotta ask," Steve said, leaning forward. How do you not laugh? I mean, I've seen the videos. Tourists dancing, making faces, waving their hands. You just stand there. You have a crack? Samuel's voice was quiet, with the rounded vowels of Jamaican London. You train yourself to see beyond what's directly in front of you, sir. The tourist who's waving. You notice the child who's wandered too close to the horse. The man making faces. You observe the woman behind him who looks unwell. Your duty isn't to the moment. It's to the whole. Steve sat back, considering this. That's deep. That's real deep. He studied the younger man's face, noticing the tension in his jaw, the careful containment. Something was waiting beneath the surface. Now, Carla tells me you've got something you wanted to share. On something about my work. Samuel nodded slowly. His hands remained on his knees. I wanted to thank you, sir, on behalf of my brother. The studio lights buzzed. The audience, sensing a shift, grew quieter. My brother Michael, Samuel continued. He was a soldier too. Jamaican Defense Force. He did 2 tours in Afghanistan. He wrote to me once about how the nights were the hardest. Not the fighting, the waiting, the not knowing if tomorrow would come. Samuel paused, steadying himself. He said there was this DVD someone sent. Your stand-up special. He said it was the first time in 6 months he laughed until his stomach hurt. He watched it every night before sleep. Said it kept the darkness away. Steve's hands had stopped moving. His smile had softened into something more vulnerable. Your brother sounds like a good man. He was? Hi, sir. Samuel's voice held. He was my hero. He enlisted when our father left. Sent money home so I could finish school. When I told him I wanted to join the British Army, he didn't try to talk me out of it. He just said, be the man others can lean on. Samuel drew a breath. He was killed in 2019. I was standing guard when I got the news. The audience released a collective exhale. Somewhere, a woman wiped her eye. Steve nodded slowly, his voice dropping to almost a whisper. And you stayed at your post? Yes, sir. Didn't move? No, sir. Just stood there with your brother in your heart and your face like stone? Yes, sir. Steve looked away, blinking rapidly. He had interviewed thousands of people over the decades. Presidents, movie stars, ordinary people with extraordinary stories. But this quiet dignity, it hit him somewhere unprotected. Man, he breathed, that is the definition of duty. He leaned forward, elbows on knees. So your brother watched my comedy over there in Afghanistan? Tell me something. What was his favorite bit? Samuel smiled, and it transformed his face. The one about the dog, and the Thanksgiving turkey. Steve's laugh came out wet, caught between amusement and tears. The dog stole the turkey off the counter, and I had to tell my wife it was the neighbor's? That one? He shook his head. I made that story up. I don't even have a dog. Michael didn't care if it was true, sir. He said it reminded him of home, of normal life, of a world where the biggest problem was a missing turkey. Samuel paused. He said your comedy taught him that strength isn't about never being afraid. It's about laughing anyway. The dam broke. Steve Harvey pressed his palms to his face, shoulders shaking. The audience rose to their feet, applause thundering through the studio, but Steve barely heard it. He was thinking about 1992, driving through Mississippi with $3 in his pocket, sleeping in his Ford Tempo, asking God why nothing was working. He was thinking about the nights he almost quit, almost went back to selling insurance, almost surrendered the dream that had kept him alive since he was a kid, listening to comedy albums on a crackling record player. He never imagined that a man on the other side of the world, in a war zone, would wrap his loneliness around those jokes and survive another day. Samuel Wilson sat still as the ovation washed over them. He had not cried. He would not cry here. But something loosened in his chest. A knot that had pulled tight since the morning two officers in dress uniform appeared at the barracks door. Steve finally lowered his hands, eyes red-rimmed. "I gotta tell you something, guardsman. I do this show every day. Every day somebody sits in that chair and tells me their story, but your brother..." His voice cracked. "Your brother gave my work a purpose I never knew it had." He reached across and grasped Samuel's hand, holding it firmly between both of his own. "Thank you for coming here. Thank you for telling me about Michael. And thank you for standing guard while carrying that weight. That's the real heroism. Not the furry hat, not the sword, the standing." Samuel inclined his head, the slight nod of a soldier acknowledging a superior, but his eyes were bright. In the control room, the director whispered into his headset, "Stay on them, don't cut away." And the cameras kept rolling as two men, one who made people laugh, one who protected them, sat together in the light, holding each other's grief like something sacred. The commercial break offered only 90 seconds. 90 seconds for Steve Harvey to excuse himself, retreat to the dim hallway behind the set, and press his back against the cool cinder block wall. His production team knew better than to approach. Carla stood 3 yards away, holding a bottle of water, waiting. Steve wasn't crying now. He was past crying, into that hollow space where grief and gratitude overlapped. His mind had drifted backward, not to his own struggles, but to his father. Jesse Harvey was a coal miner in West Virginia, a hard man with calloused hands and a Bible on his nightstand. And he worked 12-hour shifts underground, breathed black dust until his lungs gave out, and never once complained. When Steve announced he wanted to be a comedian, Jesse said, "Boy, you think people gonna pay money to hear you talk?" But he didn't say it mean. He said it scared, because he knew what it cost to chase a dream with nothing in your pocket. Jesse Harvey died before Steve got his first sitcom, before the millions, the Emmy, the talk show. He died believing his son might never make it, and he never got to see that he was wrong. Steve often told this story on stage, mining it for humor. The disapproving father, the stubborn son, the eventual vindication. But the humor was armor. Beneath it lived a wound that had never fully healed. A boy who wanted his father to be proud. Standing in that hallway, Steve thought about Michael Wilson. Michael, who watched Steve's comedy in a dusty outpost and wrote his brother letters about it. Michael, who never lived to see his brother become a guardsman. Michael, who died believing in something, duty, country, the man his little brother would become. Steve thought about his own sons. He had made mistakes as a father. He had been married 3 times, chased success with a hunger that sometimes blinded him to the people in his own home. But his boys knew he loved them. They knew because he told them. Every chance he got. Michael Wilson's family would never hear his voice again. 30 seconds, Steve. Carla's voice, gentle. Steve pushed off the wall. He took the water, drank half the bottle in 3 swallows. "That young man in there," he said. He came all the way from London just to tell me about his brother." "He requested this appearance specifically," Carla confirmed. "His command approved leave. He paid for his own flight." Steve shook his head slowly. "I was going to cancel this taping last week. Felt tired. Felt like I didn't have nothing left to give." He exhaled. "And here comes this brother, flying across the ocean to give me something I didn't even know I needed." The floor manager appeared, signaling ready. Steve straightened his jacket, touched his pocket square, walked back into the light. Samuel Wilson still sat in the guest chair, exactly as Steve had left him. He had not pulled out his phone, not adjusted